Woman. Hello, everyone in the room, and for those that are joining us online. I'm Kate Henderson, the Trade Routes Program Facilitator, and I'm delighted to welcome to all of you here this evening with Shawn Andrews, a conversation with him and our other facilitator, Jaynaya Winma. RMIT acknowledges the Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung people of the Eastern Kulin Nation, on whose unceded lands we are coming to you here tonight. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and I'd like to extend this respect to any Indigenous people that we have on the line with us tonight. So tonight for me, this evening is about hope and inspiration. Since May this year, we've elected 11 Indigenous representatives in our federal parliament. By the end of May, our Prime Minister committed to the Uluru Statement of the Heart and will look to include a First Nations voice in the Constitution. In June, Aboriginal Economic Development Victoria launched Yuma Yuramboy strategy, generating greater individual and collective wealth for Aboriginal Victorians. And last night, Victoria passed on landmark legislation to create a First Nations Treaty Authority to oversee treaty negotiations with state government. And now we come to Trade Routes, a program to help First Nations businesses go global. We have in this part of this program participants from manufacturing, from the service industry, from hospitality. We have artists, makers, designers, retailers, fashion designers, people in the food and beverage industry, all looking to support one another, to grow, to thrive and to give back to their community. And so for me, just ending now on inspiration, we have two people here that are going to bring stories to us tonight to inspire us about what's possible in growing Aboriginal businesses. So I'd like to firstly welcome Jaynaya Winma, who's going to facilitate our conversation tonight with Shawn Andrews. So Jaynaya, if you are happy to introduce yourself, we'd love to hear more about you.
Hi, my name's Jaynaya Winma. I'm a Noongar Ballardong woman from country Western Australia. I have lived in Naarm, which is Melbourne, for the last 20 plus years. And I would also like to thank the Kulin Nations for the land on which I live, work and get to play on. And the reason why I'm here, I'm a dual business owner. I describe myself as a glow-getter, a change breaker, and a connector of all people, but mostly Indigenous business owners. And my two businesses represent who I am to the core. Blackbone Sisterhood is a connector of Indigenous women in the professional industries, giving them space to be themselves, but also thrive in their workplaces. And Essential Services is a cleaning company that allows women to empower themselves within the cleaning industry, because it wasn't predominantly a nice industry for us Black women back in the day. So repowering ourselves to get into that frame of mind. So yeah, and I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today, Shawn. Shawn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Thanks for that, Jaynaya. Jingira everyone. Bukananga Jam, Bukananga Maragam, Unya Shawn Andrews, Unya Mananjali, Unya Bar, Jaynaya. I think I should probably be interviewing you, really. Hey, all the awesome things you're up to.
Oh, it's fun that we do what we do, and I think, Shawn, the reason why we've got you here is your amazing products that's on the table with us, but all the other ventures you got through the pipeline and continuing to have those amazing business ideas. So I think the first one that we can talk about is amazing business on the table. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, Dhuwa coffee. Hey, been a bit crazy, I think, Dhuwa, and the way it's been able to grow and what it's been able to do. So it started really just out of an idea. And February 18th last year, I was sitting in a meeting with a Woolworths buyer where we thought we'd get one product on the shelf in like October, and they turned around and said, well, we want 8 in 100 stores in 12 weeks in COVID. So that was crazy. And so we got that there, 8 SKUs in there, and then it just grew to 960 stores, plus now our B2B market. We export with the largest Indigenous-owned FMCG product in the world, which is great, bad as well, because, you know, we'd think there'd be bigger ones overseas and stuff like that. It just shows where we're at, and also to be thankful Woolworths partnering with us to really put us on the shelf.
I know I was excited to see it on the shelf in Woolies during lockdown, since we weren't allowed to go anywhere. We did get excited, and I know your social media kind of went off with everyone tagging you guys in that. So with this now, where do you sit with it? Like, I know you were talking about you've got a coffee house or a facility that you're doing stuff in? Or?
Yeah, so I often call it the coffee office where I work from, which is down with the manufacturers we partner with, which is Griffith Bros. But then we also bought, as in Supply Holdings, we bought a legacy Australian business called Aroma's Coffee, which isn't public, but it is now, I suppose. We've owned it now for a few months, but we bought that up in Queensland, essentially so we could own, again, our own roasting facilities. But according to Westpac, we were the first Indigenous business, so they didn't have any knowledge of Indigenous business who'd bought a legacy brand in Australia. It was part of what we need to do in order to continually prove ourselves that we can deliver and we can grow in, and we can prove the doubters wrong in that space of Indigenous people and the negative narrative towards us. We continue to try and find ways to do that, and purchasing aromas was a really important part of that. So we now picked up teas, and we've got iced coffee products and a whole bunch of things that will now go to market just from that purchase.
Yeah, breaking news. But it didn't come about just by accident. Do you want to tell us a bit more about the back process with Supply Oz and how you came about this journey?
Yeah, I suppose we can separate Supply Oz sometimes from Dhuwa as a product, even though Dhuwa is Supply Oz product. Supply Oz, we wanted to create these sort of a house of procurement and a house of brands. And with Supply Oz, which if you don't know, Supply Oz, it's our overarching holdings company that we set up to build what we wanted to do. And I do own both with my two business partners, but Adam Williams and Jolene Hicks. And we were at a Murray event here in at another university, all hanging out together, and we were talking about how money doesn't get down to the ground to help the people who do the work in our communities. And we're just sick of suicides. Like, we're sick of our people dying. It makes us all age quicker, and all the things around it's just not fun. We thought, maybe over a glass of wine or two, we thought, great idea, let's get a business together. And Adam isn't the sort of person to slow down. So 2 days later, we've got a business started, and he goes, we need a name. And I thought, Supply Oz. And he goes, why Supply Oz? I said, well, it's wide enough that we can enter the market without anyone. It's too many part of an Indigenous word. People who aren't on our side of the fence aren't going to work with us. Too hard. Can't pronounce it, not going to bother. The legacy of colonisation, I suppose. But we started this Supply Oz ending. We thought we need to get into the market. We need to do procurement. That's where we're going to play because we've got expertise in there. And we went disruptive to begin with. We went out and we attacked a whole bunch of things to get our name out. There was a deliberate strategy by us. And COVID hit. And we happened to own the exclusive rights to a hand sanitizer product, which was meant to be 15 mils, 2 pallets every quarter. And Woolworths needed 120 tonnes of it. And that changed our lives overnight. It made some great things happen for us, but it also created a lot of problems. We grew from a very small business to a medium enterprise in the space of 6 weeks. And when that occurred, the processes and stuff we need to get in place were extreme. The negative publicity we get being an Indigenous business, often the comments would be, that must be another government grant or something like that you guys got. And we're quite horrific at times. And, we had a lot of failures. People think they see a product like Dhuwa on the shelf, and I do a talk about this isn't strength, It's a nice, beautiful suit, great Indigenous design suit. This looks great, but this isn't strength. Strength's when you're in the corner crying your eyes out because you don't know what you're going to do with yourself, or you're having a really hard time. You're at the strongest when you're ultimately at your weakest. And getting people to understand that a product doesn't get to the shelf without many of those moments, whether they are directly related to that product, like the failures of trying to get, say, a product like Dhuwa to the shelf. We had many before we started the Woolworths contract, or life failures. Simply being told, I don't know how many times today I'm told that you can't do that, even by people who we work closely with. That's crazy. You will never get that off the ground. That's silly. You should be focusing here. You should be doing that. They just don't have the same mentality as us.
Yeah. I think firstly, can you show your inside of your jacket to the camera? Because I think it's really cool on the inside. We're representing our black labels here. So can you tell us who they are?
Well, this is actually ours.
Oh,
so we designed this. This is one of the
earlier.
Yeah, so you've got my name on the inside here somewhere, which is pretty. I thought was pretty sick. I've never ever had a fitted suit or shirt in my life. People who know me well know that 16 years ago, 17 years ago, I was living in a car stealing food to survive, and now I'm rolling around in custom designed suits. But this is actually created by a guy named Mitch Graham. He's our stylist, all right. But we decided that we need to get some suits made. We wanted our imprint on them. So on our, not this collared shirt, but on all other shirts, they have the design on the collars and stuff like that. It's just another way for us to show our blackness and put it together.
I'm also wearing Kirikan if you're interested. I know it's not owned by me, but shout out to Amanda Healy. She does amazing stuff in the fashion industry. She's been global, which is what we're here to talk about, because you're taking some of these products globally. And I think if people are following you online in any format, and I suggest you do if you're not following Shawn online, follow him on LinkedIn. And I think you've got an Instagram page, all the plugs. Do you want to tell us about your global stuff that you've been doing at the moment?
We've been having a lot of fun. It's sort of been a bit weird in some ways because you're in a pandemic and you're coming out of a pandemic, and then all of a sudden, since we're able to move again, I reckon I've been to 7 countries in a space of like 3 months at the start of the year. But the timing's right. But to be completely serious about this, we stand on the shoulders of giants. I know you're well aware of this. And we owe it to our ancestors and to them to do what they set us up to do. I often argue with my mother when she goes, "You're out doing this again." I said, "Well, you made us this way. You made us go out here and go, when you create something, be proud of it and move it forward." And I think we've got, in the Indigenous space, an incredibly unique product to take to the world. And we're doing that. We've been over to the US. We self-funded ourselves over there to go to the US to explore the market and see what products there were there. And now we're entering into conversations around putting Dhuwa as a product in grocery channels over there. And their grocery segment is massive. I am being invited all the time to, just recently been to Harvard. I'm on my way to the APEC Summit in Phuket in a couple of weeks' time, representing actual exporting what we're doing. And we sold a lot of medical products overseas during COVID because we were able to find ways to deliver to people when their own systems, their own supply chains couldn't. So we gained a lot of experience in that space. And I think the most exciting thing about where we're at is, and I like Benson Sully's concept of, it's great to be first, but let's not be last. So it's always that idea of when we go over and we start pushing something like Dhuwa into a market like America, the US, where they're ready for an Indigenous Australian product because it's so unique. So we've got to make sure that what we do with high integrity. Otherwise, we're not leaving a pathway for others to follow. We're just leaving crumbs. That's really important. But Dhuwa will, by the end of next year, I would be really surprised if we're not in 5 countries outside of Australia.
Yes, that's exciting news for everybody, especially like a lot of our expats and our people that are living overseas at the moment that love a little piece of home. But I want to go back to when you were at Murra and that networking side of it, because I know a lot of people that we're all stepping into that entrepreneurism space. So having those conversations about talking to investors, talking to venture capitalists, all of these words and jargon that as blackfellas we haven't heard of before. And for 3 blackfellas to get around the table and kind of create Fly Oz and then expand it into everything that you're doing at the moment, that's phenomenal. I think I just want to unpack that a little bit, what the benefits of networking.
But networking it's critical to success, because you go back to when Jolene, Adam and I sat around that table, and Dion, who was there at that stage, Dan DeVal, my immediate thoughts went to, oh wow, we're going to become a national company really quickly, because we had this firm belief. We follow the Kobe Bryant saying, the Mamba mentality. we're like, we can get this done. We went in with this belief of like, we're going to go national. Geez, I don't have any networks in Sydney and I'm not smart enough to do this. I'm a really good leader, but I don't have any management skills, not really. In the company I was running, we had up to 30 staff at casuals, but we're running out to red. It was completely different. So I decided this is the level of thinking we're having was, well, if I'm going to increase networks and get an MBA, then I'm not going to do my MBA in Melbourne because I've already got great networks here. So I decided to go to a school in Sydney to do my MBA and expand on those networks. And then you start thinking to yourself, all right, our Indigenous circles can be small, but we still have participated in them, both as leaders and as participants. But then we've also got to step outside those. Some of the circles that I've stepped into have been really intimidating and really scary. Like people might see me up on stage or at an event and talking and think it's all like confidence and great and everything's going well. But sometimes I walk into a room and I like, even the other day, to ring at him and go, I don't think I should be here. I don't think I belong here. And often he'll say this back to me. He's like, yeah, you do. Remember whose shoulders you walk on top of. And you got to carry yourself in there. And you got to go in and meet people. Like don't go to a networking event and stand in the corner. Also don't go and get in everyone's face and be like, hey, I've got the greatest coffee in the world, you should buy it. Go and just have conversations with people. And I think the key to anything, it's like any relationship, listen more than you talk and see what you can pick up. And my small networking events have led to me, participating in leadership conferences in Switzerland, participating in UN events, going to Harvard University, amongst other things, and I think you can't put a value on the networking. But at the same time, you've got to put a value on your time and your self-care and not do too much of it. It's also really important.
Yeah, and I also love the fact that you've taken one of the sisters on the journey with you guys, and kind of recognising the value in that, because like sometimes as Indigenous women, we kind of don't feel like we fit also. And a lot of spaces when I first started my business was taken up by a lot of our brothers, and like how you kind of conflicted with going, how do I support them but also make my own way? And so I really love the fact that you've included Jolene on that journey, and because she lives on the other side of the country as well, so WA shout out, that she meeting around that table and kind of going, yeah, let's do this.
It's cute that you think we had any choice in the matter whether she's going to be involved. Have you met Jolene? Like, she's fierce, but she's also our cultural yardstick, I suppose, because whilst I'm facilitating truth-telling forums and stuff like that, and I'm right amongst that cultural element of what we need in our fight and our struggle, and we're doing the cultural stuff we need to do on country at times. If you're in the 9 to 5 of business, you can get stuck there at times, and you need someone who can keep you on task. And Jolene's really good at that. Also, we're all children of Indigenous women. So for us not to respect Indigenous women or women in general, it's wrong. It's, we come from her, and all the strong people in my family have been women, Indigenous women. And I think to myself, why wouldn't you want to surround yourself with more Indigenous women? And whether the person you partner with initially doesn't understand a balance sheet, well, you know what, I didn't either. So you've got to take it from that point of view. And I think that's where the difference comes in, that financial literacy. Our women haven't been given opportunities. Yet, if you look at most of the major Indigenous government-run organisations, NGOs, they're almost all run by women. So there's great strength there too. You've got to look at the good and the bad. Jolene's a lawyer. She's on a lot of boards. She's very successful in her own right and heavily involved in the strategy side of the business and making sure that everyone's doing what they're meant to be doing. You need that person. So I'm really fortunate that we've got her on board.
Yeah, and I think that's really important too when you're looking for a business partner, looking at those strengths and weaknesses and what you bring to the table and what they bring to the table. And especially with looking at that from a cultural lens. We know like there's a lot of black cladding out there, and when we're talking about like trade routes, our mob have been trading in different ways for years, and especially internationally as well. You look at all of our countrymen from Broome, they have the Malay background and they all look half Malay, and so that strength with that and kind of honouring that trade route and what you're doing at the moment with your products, and even to an extent back when you were doing Indigicate, like honouring those trade routes. How are you navigating being 100% owned black business in the black cluttered world?
It's difficult. Some of our ventures too, we've had to learn. We've made some bad business partner decisions too to get some brands off the ground, and trying to navigate the difference between a JV and a partnership and investment and capital raising and things like that. When you get to like our stage that we were in, it was, you know, there were some people that we should never have ever met, and we got into business too. Some Indigenous, some not. Mostly not, though, to be completely frank. But being 100% Indigenous, we, to begin with, we had really strong discussions around what is the importance of this moving forward. Like, because, you know, you get three semi-clever Indigenous people in the room, talking about myself, Jolly and Adam, and we do a north of $10 million deal as our first deal, and people start going, oh, we want to partner with you, we want to invest in you, we want to grow you, and you sort of sit down and go, because you want to, you know, we come from nothing, so we've got to eat, we've got to grow, we've got to take care of our kids and our families. So where do? Do we take the money? And I don't feel bad for, I always want to see black people get paid, yeah. So I don't feel bad for people who do take the money in whatever context that is. But for us, we need to sit there and go, what's our integrity look like at the end of the day? When I look at my two little girls, Lucy and Chloe, in the future, am I going to be able to say to them that we held our integrity to what the standards that my grandmother would hold? We had to go 100% Indigenous, but we did have big debates. People threw a lot of money at us early on, and some of it was life-changing money. And we said no to it because we had to stick to what we wanted to do and what we wanted to achieve. Plus, they didn't have the same vision as us. 5% of every product of Dhuwa that gets sold, any brand that Supply Oz has, goes back to the charity Dreaming Futures to end Indigenous kids living in care. That's the driving force on a lot of things we do. I think being 100% Indigenous is also really cool. We can walk around and say that. How many businesses, and that's a competitive advantage. You know, like, you put us up against another Indigenous company, and this is Indigenous businesses have got to think like this. And we're going for the same tender at government. I can turn around and say I'm 100% Indigenous owned. If you can't, you're going to lose that contract. Far more ESG totals come out of 100% Indigenous owned than a non. They're things that have to be considered. I'd like to stay 100% owned until the day I die, but you know, hopefully one of the girls takes over the business and they can do whatever they want then.
Yeah, I think that's really important too, like talking about and owning that exit strategy at the get-go, like having that planning of what will happen, because you don't want it to be a surprise. And I think a lot of joint ventures have that struggle when they come into that and they are face-to-face with that exit strategy. So planning in advance for what happens there and what that looks like, especially with that shareholder agreement.
NDAs, always have an NDA. I even spoke to somebody at the event on last week, an Indigenous person who I trust and trusts me. I said, if you're going to come talk to me about your idea, I want you to make me sign an NDA straight away, a non-disclosure agreement, for anyone who doesn't know, because the reality is people rip people off, so you need to come in and do that. The other thing you need to consider too is what your shareholders agreement looks like. And don't just read it yourself and think you know. Actually spend the money and get a lawyer to do it. And if you can't spend the money, wait until you've got enough to do it, or find a way. Because those shareholder agreements can be really tricky. If I know more about business structure than you, I can rip you off from the shareholders agreement pretty quickly. I can form many different ways to do that. So you've got to be really careful with that. And you've got to assume, for good or for bad, that everyone's trying to rip you off in the early days. But just do the paperwork and do it well. And we've learnt from that firsthand. Probably lost a $60 million contract with the government because the paperwork didn't stack up the right way. Which is an enormous amount of money. I can't believe I'm saying that out loud when I think about where I've come from and that, but you know, that's the reality of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think especially in COVID, I think that's when I had a lot more to do with Adam as opposed to you, because we introduced that Indigenous Business Happy Hour where Indigenous business owners from all across Australia got together and just caught up and talked about stuff. And the majority of us were talking about our losses. But Adam was reluctantly sitting in the room, kind of like wanting to celebrate. And we validated the fact that like you had that huge success while we're all kind of in our little bubbles. I think that's really important to remember too, celebrating those successes. Like we always talk about those failures, and especially Indigenous people, we're kind of known for being thought of in that negative context. So celebrating those successes. And how did you guys celebrate that success?
So we didn't really get a chance to. he said, the problem is they don't let me have the credit card, he said, because I'm a flash black, you see, so without knowing that I am. One of the funny stories, Adam and I, we were in the US, we went and sat courtside to a game of basketball, and that was our way of celebrating. It was my lifetime dream to do that, and it was great to do that with someone who I love and admire like Adam, a real good brother, and just the things that I can do with my girls. You know, the success for us now is what can we do with our families? How do we build a work environment where we can do our executive retreat, which is just fancy words for going away somewhere. How can we do that and invite everyone in families? And how do we then celebrate that? And how do we also shift out of back in the day where you might have gone out in the town and drank too much into what can we do to grow as a celebration? So it's really, really important because you get bogged down. Like somebody said the other day, when we hit the 900 stores in Woolworths and everyone was sort of having a great chat and celebration, I was sitting in there doing a sale for something else. And then I left and went home. And then the conversation next day was, well, do you not realise what happened? And sometimes you sit there and you go, no, because not just because you're working, it was, you know, we're always expecting things to fall apart. So we're expecting things to fail. We're expecting the man to come and take it from us. You sort of sit there and you go, I've just got to keep moving, keep hustling. I think Jane, my wife, always says to me, she says, the minute you stop hustling is the minute I know something's wrong. So.
Exactly. But I also love the fact that when you were celebrating courtside, you also represented mob. And I don't know if everyone out there saw you because my social media was flooded with you guys representing. How did you represent our mob on the courtside ticket?
Well, we did two things. It was a marketing ploy from us. So we went twice. So the first night we went when we wore Clothing the Gaps, always was, always will be. And, you know, they stand out. They're beautiful, beautiful shirts that we had on. But we sat courtside the first night and there were 4 seats next to us. And we weren't on the side where the camera was, and it was fun, but it wasn't really. I was like, I don't think we can say this is marketing. And then all of a sudden, Kyrie Irving sits next to me. And this is his first game coming back in. He's not allowed to play. He can't play because he's not vaccinated, but he can enter the stadium. So all of a sudden, I have just media everywhere. And I turned around and I think it said to Kyrie Irving, I said, oh, yeah, I'm going to come back and play for the Boomers because he's born in Melbourne. He said, no, I won't be doing that. And then he moved over 2 seats. And 2 other people sat there. So I was like, well, at least I said something, I suppose. And then we got back again because we're cheering Paddy Mills on, you know, the greatest Australian basketballer of all time. And we sat behind a guy named Luka Doncic. So if anyone knows anything about basketball, he's the up-and-coming next greatest and my favourite player. And we were there in these always was, always will be shirts. And my social media went off. I'm like, why is everyone like, what's going on here? And I think the word big note got thrown around a few times, which was fun. But we were literally centre of the camera the whole time. A lot of people watch Paddy Mills, Aboriginal Australian player, plus Luka Doncic, plus Kevin Durant spat the dummy that night, and a game-winning shot got hit right in front of us. So we did really well. That we met a lot of business people who wanted to help us expand our product as well. That was the real key of it for us. Was in that room, this fancy little room afterwards, we just had people lining up. What products have you got? And there's some other new products which I can't discuss at the moment that will go to market later on, a direct result of that trip and doing that. Yeah.
So that also segues into one of the other things I wanted to ask you as well, is that tall poppy syndrome, or how do you and your team deal with all of that?
Yeah, I think a number of years ago, Adam Goods said, I asked him, I said, look, Goodsy, like all the nonsense he was going through, how do you deal with it? And I can't compare myself to what he went through. Let's just clarify that. He said, the thing you got to do is you've got to really lean on your circle and the people who love you and the people you trust and rely on them for the honest feedback that you need. And the second that anyone stops giving you honest feedback in that circle, you need to rethink your circle. Because if you are doing the wrong thing, or you need to tell you, but you also need them to support you. Because when Dhuwa first went public, I'll reflect back on another story actually. I was down at Lake Conda Mission. We were running a camp with Indigicate a number of years ago, and we were doing a camp for Indigenous kids in care. And I was doing it was January the 25th when we were down there. And I just did this real short film, and I said, showed everyone around it and said things like, if your family had been slaughtered, blah, 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 would you celebrate the day it all began? And I posted that up. And 5 weeks later, we got a letter in the mail saying, I know we live, I'm going to kill you and your family. And that taught me at that time how careful I have to be with not just what I say, but also when we start to gather success. Because when Dhuwa went to the shelf, we got so many racist comments. And then people would turn around and say, see, like turning up in a suit and stuff, be like, oh, you're too good for us now. So, well, I didn't change from last week just because I've got a business that's doing okay. Like, we're not rolling in money. We're just making it, we're not there yet. It's hard at times. But also the Indigenous network that we all have is incredible. And we might get little jolts at times and go, oh, Jaynaya's up on TV again. Like, what am I doing wrong? Hey? But we're not really. We're really all celebrating each other and supporting each other. I tend to find in our world, people are more like, can you tell me how you did that? Or how's it going? Or we love seeing you. I think you even said to me a couple of weeks ago, you're like, oh, I'm really proud of what you're doing. You're doing great. And that's sort of the way we work. And I think I sometimes find it harder with the compliments than I do. I sort of get in there, you're like, come on, someone come and cut me down. I'm ready for this. But it doesn't work that way always.
Yeah.
So it's hard, but I know. I think the most important part of all that is just trusting that you belong where you are. And we have a hard time trusting that we belong anywhere in this country, even though we're the most Australian thing to exist here. But you've got to trust that. And that will, any negativity, any tall poppy, it sort of eliminates it. I belong here. I do. People died for me to get here. And now it's my turn to play the part that I have to play, so I'm going to own up and belong it. If someone tries to say, you're too good for us and you don't belong here anymore, well, I belong here because this is exactly what we set up to achieve. And we're not even anywhere near started getting to where we need to get to.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the free things that we can give is that support, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's on social media. I call it lateral love. So feel free to jump on LinkedIn and it'll show us some lateral love, because that's one of the free things that we can give each other. And I always try and do it consciously. I have started to shift my mindset with how I'm articulating something, so it's no longer in that negative context, it's in that positive. Even if I'm late, I thank people for waiting for me, not saying sorry for being late. And I think that mental shift has been one of the important things. And I know you're doing a lot of changes with yourself. You're changing to this healthy mentality, and I think that comes out of your trip overseas and seeing that. So you want to share that mentality?
Yeah, ELE, hey, everyone love everyone, but it's not easy. Like from where I've come from to where I am now, it's been a hell of a journey of change, and mostly self-belief in that belonging sense. Because for our lives, let alone our parents and our grandparents, people treat us like we don't belong here. That's really, really difficult. And I think growing up with that, I was like, well, where do I actually fit in and belong? And I think that impacted my health mentally and physically for a long time. But last year, when I hurt my back really badly and I couldn't pick up my 2-year-old at the time, I decided I needed to change. And it was a mindset change. Not being angry about, you can get angry when you've got a baby and you've got to change nappies and you go, oh, I'd have to do another one, and change that mentality to, I get to do this. I get to, how lucky am I? I get to get up and go to business and work and do what I love. I get to be here doing what we're doing now. And that was one shift that I took. The other one was seeing a PT and getting my back right, which really helped my mental health because I could move better, and changing the idea of I don't need to lose weight. I need to be healthier. And I have lost 11 kilos and started that process, and it's been really important. But it's so good for me in the way that I am able to work better and be a better dad, be a better husband, be a better friend. It comes down to my ability to take care of myself. Plus, I want to be here a long time. Like, how many Indigenous men are dead by 50, 55? You know, I'm 40 now. I want to be old. I want to know what that feels like. Maybe I won't when I get there, but I do. And that sort of comes down to how I want to do and how I want to be that type of leader.
Speaking of the leadership that you're taking on board, I wanted to ask what your table would look like with that co-designing business landscape. In your mind, what do you envisage that to be?
Yeah, I'm sort of big on co-decide now. So, and co-design and the shift from that model, the model works. So what was it? Participatory, I can't even say the word, model to begin with out of Scandinavia. Gosh, I've all of a sudden hit a wall that. But what they were trying to achieve was really simple. How do you get communities and community projects to thrive? You get the community involved. And I think with co-design, they've tried to do that here. And you see it happen. You get all these great people around the table. But often at the end of that, the people who make the decisions aren't the people at the table. They're not us. They make the decisions for us. And we could have the best ideas and often our ideas get stolen, or we could have the best ideas and they could say no, or budgets get in the way, or KPIs get in the way. And we're never part of the actual decision-making part of the process. So it's the shift from co-design to co-decide needs to happen. Doesn't mean co-design doesn't happen, but if you've got people making decisions who are us for our own people, then we'll also be in the co-design process. And that's a real big thing that I learned from my travels, working at Harvard with 40 incredible Indigenous people, listening to the truth-telling stuff that I go to, like having one of the aunties walk in and say, I've been here 40 times before. And like, how many times have we heard that? Because how many more tables do we have to sit at? And look at business. Like, if one more person tries to get me in for a free breakfast to sit down and tell them business ideas, like, no, because you're just going to take our ideas. You're not going to let us have any decision making in it. Government don't want to step out of the way and let us make decisions on it. And we'll thrive if we get that opportunity. People need to shift from that model. So when I look at a co-design, I think of the co-decide part of it. Who do I need at that part? Who are the leaders that we need there? And then let's bring the people together on that table.
Yeah, and I think with the new treaty process, not just here in Queensland, that kind of got launched yesterday with the state government there, I think those conversations that you're talking about are going to be one that we thrive in because we've already got the foundations for that with government now. We know what we want and how to achieve it. So structurally, we've got a blueprint to go in there, and I think that's really beneficial with what you're saying with that co-design space.
In my spare time, I do a lot of truth-telling facilitating, which I love, and also with organisations. So I've been working quite heavily with Parks Vic, helping them to understand the spaces and working with them when they work with the mobs and do stuff like that. And then also get the mobs invite me in to be in between them and the consultants. Doesn't mean I'm immune to the mob telling me off from time to time, which is, the way it is. But it's just a brilliant position to be in Victoria. They are really ahead in that space. Still a long way to go. And I see Queensland signing up, and I saw their little couple of years, and I'm moving back up because I'm a Murray. I'm moving back up there at the end of the year, and we see where they're heading, and I'm like, you're not going to get that done in 2 years. I've stopped thinking we can undo 240 years of colonisation in 2 years. It's not going to happen. Be realistic. Say, like what they've done here, we're going to put the truth telling in instead. How long will that take? Take as long as it takes. So let's get 4 or 5 years in. Let's bring in the commission like they have wonderful leaders in that space. Let's get the treaty movement going. Let's get the legislation stuff around it going. And maybe while they're doing that, maybe they can legislate a way to stop blackcoating.
I think you're setting up yourself for when you go to Queensland, like in what you just said there. So I don't think you've consciously thought about that, but I think that's where you're going to thrive in when you move back to Queensland. I think that's an amazing space for you to be in.
Well, if the elders want me to be part of it, I'll be part of it. So, but I've been in Victoria such a long time now that even though that might be my land and country, there's still a lot of respect to me from the elders and to being able to be put in a position of privilege like that. But, as you do, any opportunity we get to help the lives of our people, we put our hands up for.
And I think that's another one of those things that we forget that Australia's built up of 250 different language groups. 250 different nations across Australia. So that cultural integrity, when we talk about it in that space, where we honour those people who we go back on country to. And I've been living off country for 20 odd years. Every time I go back, I always touch base with all of our elders too. I think that's really important to do. So with Dhuwa and what you're doing globally, how are you doing that with traditional owner groups, merging that into the global market?
Well, what we're trying to do is work out how we can utilise other Indigenous businesses. I think you talk about the treaty movement. One of the big problems of the treaty movement is that Indigenous people have to treaty amongst themselves first. This is my belief. That we as mobs need to come together and work out how we're going to do business and how we're going to work together. Once we've done that, we can then look at an international model of how we then form treaties in that environment and how that grows. That would be ideally in my mind how that should work. But the reality of it that it isn't like that. And I think from a Dhuwa point of view, we've got to look at other Indigenous businesses that we can partner with. How can we, here's a prime example. The charity is great in Australia and we can take some money from the US for our charity, but wouldn't we be better off working locally to solve some problems they've got with that money? Is that not a better model? Does that not show that we're better in tune with our other Indigenous cousins and stuff over there? So I think that's really important for us. As far as like elder advice, I get elder advice all the time, good, bad and ugly. I think from a Dhuwa point of view, the feedback we get is just keep doing what you're doing. And I reckon the second we step out of line with our integrity or we don't do what we say we're going to do with the charity, which, still 12 to 18 months of being where it needs to be to really establish and go, we'll get told. The second that we don't turn up to the events we're meant to turn up to, or we don't call something out like we're meant to, we'll get told. We're going to find a way to grow coffee at scale in Australia on Indigenous land, which, by the way, is all the land here, just in case you want to know, and find other ways that we've got other products that we're doing that sort of stuff with. And we're also, part of me, trying to find a way, how can we become the investment arm for Indigenous businesses as well? So how can we work with elders and leaders and go, well, have you got a great idea? And I've had a few great products sent to me recently. How would that product work at, say, Woolworths? Can we invest in them and help them? And invest in them in a way that's not, we want to own all your business. No, we'll own part of it till here, and then this is how you're going to get it back from us. We're not going to cost you a fortune to do it. Because I think there's something in that. And what I'd hope would happen is we get 3 or 4 years down, you'd be like, no, you're not going anywhere. How about we renegotiate that to something different? Because we've got to change the model. While banks are great and they work with us, most of our people can't get a loan. I think I got my first ever loan only like 6 months ago. I'm 40. So, we've got to find creative ways to work with people to do those things.
No, I think that's deadly. And thanks for having that yarn with us, Shawn. What advice would you give to all of our Trade Routes participants and people watching for your journey, but your learning?
Yeah. Don't quit. Doesn't mean don't take care of your own mental health and don't take time off when you need to. Don't rest, but just don't quit. Like, for every one product that really succeeds, 6 of them are going to fail. And don't hold on to your product. Like someone said to me, I just laughed at this so much. They said, how do you tell someone who's got a really bad product that it's bad? It's like telling them that their baby's ugly. I started laughing. I was like, who would do that? I said, exactly. And I've been there with products and brands. But you've got to be able to have that honest conversation too. Like sometimes your product isn't good enough. No matter how much you love it or you think it tastes good, it might not. And if it doesn't, don't beat yourself up on it. Don't quit. Listen to the advice, change. But the most important part of all that is don't quit. Every day, the sun goes down, a new sun comes up and a new day starts. You've got to treat every day like that. And in that not quitting space, like Dhuwa is great. Premium coffee product, it's selling, doing all the things that we could ever dreamt it could do. It's like version 7. He said, someone tried my coffee once and poured it out in front of me. He said, you'll never sell this rubbish. And I was like, why? Because it tastes like rubbish, but why? They couldn't give me that answer, but if they did, I could have gone, all right, let's go and work on this. If 5 people tell me it tastes like rubbish, I've got a problem. If 1 does, maybe I don't. But just don't quit.
Yeah, I think for me it would be creating a toolbox that reflects you. So utilising those mentors that you were talking about with honest feedback, and that feedback that sometimes you don't like, but you have to hear it. Those different tools, supports like RMIT and institutions that are giving you that support, add that to your toolbox. And those external people that you kind of meet just randomly at a networking event, those are also go into your toolbox. So the importance of a toolbox is, for me, has been amazing, because like you randomly meet up with people for coffee, and like amazing things come out of it. So
Dhuwa coffee.
Dhuwa coffee.
Yeah.
And amazing things come out of it. Like you never know what's out there. So I think, yeah, utilising that toolbox.
That's really important though, isn't it? That being open to conversations and opportunities doesn't mean you're jumping at everything. It just means that you're being open to them. And I think that's important too, because you think about, even though I say you don't want to quit, you've got to look at what opportunities you can create. And if, for example, the coffee wasn't going to pay my bills, but something else was, maybe I need to focus on that for a bit while I build the coffee up. Don't lose the belief in it.
Exactly.
Because then you will quit. And then you'll always be that person that, what did Tommy Hafey once say to me when we were training? I thought I was a great footballer as a kid. And Tommy Hafey come down and watch us all train. And Tommy's like, you're pretty good. Like, yeah, good. Yeah, 16-year-old Shawn. He goes, yeah, but you train twice a week. And the AFL players train 5 times. And they're not going to give you their spot. If you only train twice a week and they do 5 times, how are you ever going to be better than them? And that stuck with me, in that idea of, yeah, got to work hard, not quit, and you've got to believe.
Exactly. Thanks for your deadly yarn today, Shawn, and I can't wait Dhuwa coffee to be in everyone's house.
Thank you so much, Jaynaya and Shawn. What a lovely way to spend our evening hearing from both of you. So we're really grateful from RMIT Activator and the Trade Routes program. Thank you.
Register now and start building your trade routes.